Hi you two, I hope you're well and looking forward to the summer holidays. This is our final story time together, so I thought I would read you this book called Castles Magnified to fit in with our topic. And it's a really lovely non-fiction book. It's got loads of little things on the pictures you can notice. It's actually got a magnifying glass for you to find them. And it's quite long, so I'm going to read you my favourite pages. This video might be quite long, you might want to pause it and watch it a few parts at a time, that's fine, okay? So I hope you enjoy it.
The first castles. The first English castles were built by French invaders nearly 1,000 years ago. The invaders were called Normans, and their ruler, William the Conqueror, ordered hundreds of castles to be built after defeating the English in 1066. The castles were built to show the local population that William the Conqueror was in charge now. They also provided somewhere safe for his new Norman lords to live, protected by armed soldiers. Many castles were built on hills or cliffs, which made them easier to defend. In flatter parts of the country, the Normans constructed artificial hills called mottes. Each motte was surrounded by a courtyard called a bailey, so today we call them motte and bailey castles. The walls of the castles were made from wood, which meant they could be built quickly and cheaply. England was covered in forests, so wood was easy to find. Stone castles. William the Conqueror built a wooden castle at Windsor near London. 100 years later, the new king, Henry II, ordered his men to rebuild it using stone. Stone cost a lot more than wood, but the new Windsor Castle was much stronger than the old one. It was also much larger. The work took so long that Henry II died before it was finished. Henry's grandson, Henry III, made the castle even bigger. During his reign, Windsor became a luxurious royal palace as well as an impressive fortress. The rooms were lavishly decorated and filled with expensive furnishings. The king liked to hunt deer and wild boar in the nearby forest. Windsor Castle is the oldest and largest inhabited castle anywhere in the world. It has been home to more than 40 kings and queens, and today it's one of the British monarch's official homes. The feudal system. Life in medieval England was governed by the feudal system. This meant that the king owned everything. The king allowed barons to build castles and live on his land as long as they were loyal to him. In return, the barons showed their loyalty by supporting the king during wars and fighting alongside him in battle. They also paid knights to fight on horseback. Ordinary people were considered less important than barons and knights. They had to fight in the same wars, but they did this on foot. Most ordinary people who lived in the countryside worked in the barons' fields. They were called peasants and had very little money and not many rights. Only a lucky few, known as freemen, were allowed to move around the country and work wherever they chose. People of the town. People felt safe from attack if they lived near a castle, so towns often developed around the walls of the castle. Under the feudal system, the king allowed the castle owner to hold weekly markets for the people living in the towns. At the time, there were very few shops, so markets were an important part of daily life. Market day was the busiest day of the week in most towns, and people would travel from miles around to buy and sell food and other goods. Anyone who wanted to sell anything at the market had to pay a fee to the castle owners to put up a stall. The money they paid made the lords even richer. Food and feasting. The poor only ate what they could grow themselves, which meant that they ate a lot of the same food. Lots of cabbage, onions, beans, porridge and brown bread made from rye. Meals cooked in the castles were much more interesting and varied. Lavish feasts and banquets were held when important guests came to visit the castle. The lord and his guests all sat at a special high table at the top of the great hall, facing everyone else. All the different dishes, sweet and savoury, were served at the same time, rather than in different courses like they are today. Minstrels sang and played music during the feast, and there were rules about how to behave. It was all right to spit on the floor, but not on the table, and guests were warned not to pick their teeth with a knife. Because people had bad breath, it was also considered rude to burp in another person's face. Naturally. Entertainment. Medieval tournaments gave knights an opportunity to improve their fighting skills and show off their talents to spectators. These tournaments were very popular and were watched by hundreds of people. One of the most exciting events was the joust. This involved two knights on horseback charging at each other at high speed. Dressed in a full suit of armour, each knight carried a shield and a long wooden weapon called a lance. The lance could be used to knock an opponent off his horse. Sometimes, if a knight lost a joust, he had to give his expensive armour and his horse to the winner. The biggest, most important tournaments were attended by royalty, and often the king decided to join in. One French monarch, Henry II, died a painful death when a splinter from a lance hit him in the eye. The castle courtyard. A medieval castle had to be self-sufficient as possible. If it ever came under attack, then no one would be able to leave. Occupants could be trapped inside for weeks or even months at a time. When this happened, everything needed by the castle occupants, including the lord, his family, the knights and all the servants, had to be produced inside the castle and stored safely. Supplies of food and water were of course vital, but weapons also had to be manufactured on site to defend everyone inside against the attacking enemy. As a result, life in and around the castle could sometimes be a bit like a factory. The courtyard would constantly be full of people doing lots of different jobs. Some were responsible for making and mending weapons and producing ammunition for the soldiers, while others worked hard to repair any damage to the tower walls from previous battles and make sure that the castle was ready for an attack. Magic and medicine. The Catholic Church in medieval Europe condemned magic and hunted down anyone who practiced it. Men and women accused of witchcraft could be burned alive if they were found guilty. Despite this, many people continued to believe in magic, including some monks and nuns. Medieval people blamed all sorts of things on evil spirits, including bad weather, poor harvests, and sickness. Even the most powerful rulers secretly consulted astrologers before making important decisions, and people known as alchemists claimed they could use magic to turn ordinary metal into solid gold. Medicine was not very well understood at the time. Only the very rich could afford a doctor or physician, but most of their cures were based on superstitious beliefs rather than science. Ordinary people had to rely on natural cures from a village wise woman, or simply hope that they would eventually recover. Prisoners and guards. Dark and damp dungeons are some of the most well-known features of old castles, but prisoners could be held anywhere in these huge buildings. A locked room high up in one of the towers was sometimes even harder to escape from than a stone cell under the castle. In a royal castle, like Carrickfergus in Northern Ireland, some prisoners were given quite comfortable accommodation. An important captive, such as a lord or a prince, would be well looked after, but he had to promise not to escape. He would even be allowed to send a message to his family or supporters telling them to pay a ransom for his release. Siege. Castles were expensive to build and took many years to construct. Because of this, it was usually better to capture one than destroy it. If the people inside the castle refused to surrender, then the attackers often tried to starve them out. This was done by surrounding the castle until there was no food left inside. If this didn't work, or if it took too long, huge weapons called siege engines were brought up to the castle. These were used to smash through stone walls and the strongest gates. They also helped soldiers to get into the castle by climbing over the walls. Defenders in the castle tried to drop heavy objects and boiling water onto the soldiers attacking them from below. A siege could go on for months or even years. Carlisle Castle in Cumbria was attacked an incredible 10 times, more than any other castle in Britain.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the castles book, and I really hope you've enjoyed our castles topic. So have a lovely, lovely summer holiday, and we will see you in September. Bye!